Eric, really great to have you on the show. I'm excited about your book that you've got out and your background. Sounds really interesting. Why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell them what you've been doing and where you've come from? Because it sounds like you've worked with some powerful people and done some awesome stuff.
Yeah, thanks a lot, David. And thanks for everyone who's listening right now. Really appreciate you offering up your time. And out of everything you just said there, I think the best place to start is your point about, well, where did you come from? And let me start off by telling a story in that regard. So we're going back almost 10 years to the day. It's November of 2010. And I boarded a return flight to London. And shortly after the cabin doors closed, I could tell something's not right. And as the plane begins to ascend, I start feeling rather unwell. Nauseated, start sweating quite profusely. A lot of pressure starts to build up in my chest. Soon that pressure becomes pain, goes through my left shoulder, down my left arm. And I motion to my colleague sat next to me, Lewis. I say, hey, can you feel my arm for a second? And just to make sure I wasn't completely crazy. And Lewis feels my arm and says, yeah, it feels like I've been hanging in a meat locker, and my arm was several degrees colder than the rest of my body, and I'm feeling very unwell at this point. And so Lewis jumps over, runs to get the attention of the stewardess, who asks if there's a doctor on board. And luckily for me, there was one. Doctor comes rushing over, takes my vital signs, and says, "We need to land the plane immediately. I think he's having a heart attack." And when you hear words like that, 35,000 feet in the air. I can't think of what would be further from help. Maybe if I had been an astronaut, that would have been a bit further from help. But the descent of the plane felt like an absolute eternity. I remember thinking, or just being terrified that my heart would stop before reaching safety. And I kept thinking, please just fly faster. And eventually the plane touches down in a small town in France that we had been flying over at the time, and an emergency response crew boards the plane and takes me off into a stretcher in a waiting ambulance. They had shut down the runway that we landed on, and they administer nitrates right away in the ambulance to open up the arteries and increase blood flow to the heart. And then as the ambulance speeds off to the local hospital, I looked up into the eyes of the French paramedic looking down at me and said, "Please don't let me die. I have a 5-year-old son." And in a moment like that, when you think it's game over, lights out, that's all she wrote. The truth, whatever it is for you, it reveals itself. Your soul speaks, your heart speaks, and what my heart said unnerved me. It's not like, for example, put it this way, if somebody listening, imagine if you're on your deathbed, or you think you are, and somebody says to you, "You got 5 more minutes." There's not a person listening who would say, "Oh, thank God. Would you mind passing me my laptop real quick so I could fire off a few more emails?" So I woke up, the next day in that hospital, and in terms of where I came from. So I came from, I guess, a pretty dark place, because while I had achieved quite a lot before that point, I had just been absolutely obsessed with achievement. So I had been working 100+ hour work weeks at McKinsey & Company while I was there as a consultant. Worked my tail off helping to scale Skype. So we went from 30 to about 500 people, and then we had a sale to eBay for about $4 billion. And then while building a few of my own businesses as well. But after that point, I realized that something needed to change. So I went all in on the field of peak performance, and rather from approaching it from a how do you turn a human being into a Ferrari point of view, I thought about it a bit more from like a sports point of view. If we look at peak performance or high performance in sports, we can't just, we don't achieve high performance or peak performance by just looking at what goes on the field. We have to look at what's going on off the field as well. And so I wanted to understand, well, how do I perform at a peak level? And when I say peak performance, for me, I just mean reaching your full potential in whatever it is that you're doing. How do I do that without sacrificing my health and relationships? Or how do I do it while actually improving my health and relationships? And that started a journey. I went all in and became a coach in the field, and got a lot more, fit, strong, and healthy. Became a lot more present and available as a husband and father, and it even helped me on the work front. Culminated, I guess I'd say, last year when I was recognized as the UK's CEO of the Year. And where it leads me today is that, I guess, my central belief is that everyone can reach their full potential. It's never too late to start, and we can do it without the unhealthy hustle. And that's what I do today. So I help entrepreneurs, leaders, CEOs close that gap between their best and current self, and do it holistically, multidimensionally. So it's not just all about work.
Interesting, and it has an interesting correlation because I have a friend of mine who's 40 years old, almost 41, and he was skateboarding and blew out his ankle. I mean, the bone connecting the ankle was out the side, almost popping out of his skin. And I talked to him last Monday and said, "So how you doing?" He said, "Fine." He said, "One thing that's really interesting is because I can't do things, it's made me be much more aware of time. And I really want to work on how I manage my time coming out of this, because, he's going to be wearing some type of cast or something for a while." And I said, "So does that mean that you're going to try to organize your time so you can take on more, or you're going to organize your time so you can rest more?"
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like that was one of the questions you really had to go through. And it's interesting. You mentioned that you were CEO of the Year for the UK. I mean, that's a huge thing. And normally you think that person would be a workaholic, but you're coming from this life experience where you've learned to manage your time. So talk to us about that. How did you achieve being CEO of the Year without being the workaholic who's abandoning the family, abandoning your health, and these other unhealthy behaviors?
Yeah, so I like to focus on IPA. So like the beer, but better for you. So identity, productivity, and anti-fragility. So for me, it all starts with identity. Because you're right. Normally somebody would associate that with an accolade like that with an Elon Musk and say that kind of approach to life. Yeah. And if we don't start with the identity piece, then we go off into those workaholic tendencies. In the book that I've just written, the 3 alarms, I share 3 simple phone alarms that I use to segment my day. Each segment of my day is powered by a best self identity in 3 key areas of life. So my health, my wealth, and relationships. I think of work as my wealth driver, right? So health, wealth, and relationships. And I pick a phrase. I have a phrase for each of those segments, and then I time that phrase to go off with a phone alarm at the time of day that would most benefit from being powered by that best self identity. So let me give you an example. So at 6:30 a.m., the first alarm on my phone goes off, and it says World Fitness Champion. I'm not a World Fitness Champion. I never will be. I made the basketball team, for example, in high school, and then I never played a game. I made the baseball team, but could never hit. Made the football team, but never started. So I was like very consistently mediocre at sports. But the World Fitness Champion, that at 6:30 a.m., that's who I switch into. That's like the guardian angel that kind of comes to my side, or me at my best, and that's the version of me who goes to the gym. As I'm walking through the doors of the gym, I don't walk through as Eric. I walk through as, okay, this is World Fitness Champion time. That's who's walking through it. And when I'm doing the workout routine, and this happens, I mean, this just happened the other day, at least once, twice a week it will happen. So I'll be doing a particular exercise. And so I'll give you a very specific example. So I was doing tricep push downs, right? On the cable, the cable pull downs or push down. And I had picked a weight in my head. I was doing a weight that I normally would do for 15 reps. And I said, I'm going to do 50. And, that's ridiculously, larger amount of reps. And because I had that World Fitness Champion mentality, as I got to the 15th rep, I just kept going, but I just kept counting just in 5. So let me do 5 more, let me do 5 more, let me do 5 more. And it was that World Fitness Champion identity that powered me through all the way to 50 reps. Now that might sound a little bit, extreme, but in the early days when I was using an identity like this, I'd get to the 8th repetition on an exercise that I say would want to get to the 10th rep. And whereas I would normally falter and think that maybe I'm not going to get to that 10th repetition, suddenly that identity would kick in and I'd do the 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th because champions do more. So that's what powers that part of the day for me. At 9 a.m., the next alarm on my phone goes off. And what I mean by this is like if you go into your phone and you go to set an alarm, most people don't realize that you set an alarm to wake up the next day. But also if you look at the alarm as you're setting it, you'll see a field that says like either name or label where you can click on that and actually give the alarm a name so that a phrase that means something you will appear on the screen of the phone when the alarm goes off. So 9 a.m., next alarm goes off. In the past, when I was a CEO, now I focus on coaching full-time, it would say world's best CEO. These days it says world's best coach because that's who's showing up at 9 a.m. That's the version of me. It reminds me how decisive, inspiring, reliable does that version of me need to be? How does that version of me interact, behave? And the game changer for me is at 6:30 p.m. And the alarm that goes off there says world's best husband and father to prompt the question, how would the world's best husband and father walk through that door right now? So to answer the question, what is it that you do, or how do you go about doing that without being a workaholic? Well, it starts with identity, and it starts with being super intentional about what best looks like, not just on the work front, but also on the health and the home fronts. And coming up with a mechanism to cue that identity in. And 3 alarms is just an approach, right? Just a way to do it.
A couple questions on that. First of all, it sounds like maybe you've studied, neuro-linguistic programming. So you've got this mantra, this statement, and you're saying it often enough that you've created a new pathway in your brain that you believe that, and it overcomes the one that was stopping you at 8 reps from getting to 10 reps. Correct.
Yeah. So I haven't studied NLP, but I do believe that identity drives behavior, and that if we look at the etymology of the word identity, if we break it comes from 2 Latin words which mean repeated beingness. So it all makes sense then when you think about identity and the power of this approach, because the more you behave like something, the more you become that thing. So it becomes this virtuous circle, right? So at first you pick this World Fitness Champion and you go into the gym and you're like, I am not a World Fitness Champion. This is not me. But as you start to behave more and more and do World Fitness Champion-esque stuff, like 1 or 2 more reps here and there, not quitting when you otherwise would normally quit, it starts to reinforce itself.
And the other question I have for you is, so many of us have our identity, I think everyone does actually, from life experience, from childhood. And that's a mix of wounds as well as some positive reinforcement. And you went through this life-changing experience where you thought you were going to die. Not everybody has that situation happen. How do people wake up and start to really try to have a more realistic assessment of what is kind of my subconscious identity and what am I conscious of, and who really do I want that identity to be? Is that kind of what you go through, or is it a different process? And do you go through this with your clients?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely go through it with my clients. I have one of the first things I do is have them define what does best look like? What does your superhuman self look like? Health, wealth, and relationship wise, or, health, work, and home front wise. The process for doing this. So first of all, just to touch on your point about, yes, I had this experience. Now, I appreciate most people listening will not have had, I certainly hope they wouldn't have had a health scare as I did.
Yeah.
But don't dismiss this podcast because you think, oh yeah, but he went through an extreme situation. So, of course there's been no, that's garbage, because I'm sure a lot of people listening, I'm sure everyone listening at some point will have looked in the mirror and thought that something needs to change, right? It's kind of a unanimous thing that we all feel and go through. So, my point, what I would say is don't wait for a disaster to happen, for you to make that change. Now, in terms of how to make that change, you had a great point about how our identities, and this is where identity is wrong, actually, or at least our perception of it, how adults perceive identity. So we say our identities are formed by our experiences, right? So again, that's another garbage thing that we need to throw out of our minds, because that's not how we all started. And I want everyone listening to go back to being a 5-year-old for a moment. Because when you were a 5-year-old, you would suddenly become Wonder Woman or Superman or Batman or Catwoman. And did you have previous experience being those superheroes? Did you know what to do? No, you just acted as if you were those things, right? So you picked something that was completely out of your league and actually wasn't you at all. So, so much so that it's impossible for you to be it. It's a fictional character. You don't even have a chance to have, any similarity, right, or closeness to it. But yet you still chose it and you became it. So by choosing the identity, what happens when a child, if I go to one of my kids, well, maybe not my 15-year-old, but if I go to my 7-year-old, and if I put a Spider-Man costume on him, what's going to happen? He's going to start jumping around, shooting webs from his wrists. He starts behaving as that identity. So rather than thinking our identities are a result of the experiences we've had, I'm saying throw that out. Go back to how you thought of identity as a child. So, my point is, everyone listening, you've already done what I'm saying. You've done this before. This is not new to you. You just have to go back to your youth. Just pick something. Pick something aspirational, something that means something to you, something that is your superhuman self on the health, wealth, and relationship front. Give it a name. It could be a phrase like me, and maybe yours is professional athlete, or maybe you like swimming, and so you become Michael Phelps in the morning. But pick something and trust in the process that you already have lived and done as a kid. That behavior follows identity. So pick the identity and start acting as if you are that, and then you will become more and more like that.
Yeah, I like that. I like going back to that. I remember Jesus giving advice that, if you really want to be someone of deep faith that can make a difference, you got to go back to thinking like a child. Same type of thing. So I haven't heard that before. And so I love the way you're saying I'm interpolating. So change this if I'm saying it wrong. You're saying, yeah, there is some truth that your experiences have shaped you, but don't live there. Instead, go back to that attitude of thinking like a child, of the person you want to be, and having the openness and the confidence that you can get there.
Yes, let identity return the word identity and its power to how it started off with you, where it was just something you could pick. And after you picked it, you would start to behave like it.
And it's positivity instead of being a negative thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I haven't met anybody who, for example, for their health identity said, I'm going to be an unmotivated, couch potato.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Everyone naturally picks, whatever best looks like for them.
Yeah. Okay. Well, move us to the second one then. This sounds great.
Okay. So that's identity. And we have to start there because it drives everything. Okay. And it makes us think about things holistically. Next is, so how do we achieve more while doing less in a way, right? Because we're saying, no, you have to be home at a certain time. Of course, you can have an issue here or there, or I'm not saying you won't have that occasional late night of work, but you're making more time for your health. You're making more time for your relationship. So the question becomes, where does that time come from? Well, one of the places it comes from is by introducing some powerful routines in your life. And I like to turn productivity into a design issue rather than it being this, word that people perceive as a whip. I mean, how many people think positively about the word productivity, for example? You say that word productivity in a room, and a lot of people immediately probably think, oh, gosh, I'm so not productive, or I wish I was more productive, right? So I like to think, okay, let's make it a design issue. So how do we design productivity into our days? We do it through the introduction of powerful routines. And there's 3 routines that I encourage everyone listening to give it a try. And seriously, when I say encourage, give it a try, you will experience immediate benefits by trying this. Don't have this be one of those episodes where you listen to something, you go, yeah, that's a good idea. This has the power to change your life. All you have to do is just try it. Try it for a few days. First routine starts in the evening. Why do we start in the evening? Because a productive day never begins the day of, it always begins the night before. And it begins by making sure we sleep well. And there's a lot of, especially high achievers, leaders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, they get into this habit, as I did in the past, of not sleeping their full 8 hours a night, or thinking that they can get by with less. And they absolutely can get by with less, but that's not the point. Would you thrive with more? There's a gene associated with being able to thrive with less than 8 hours of sleep, by the way. The people who have this gene, they are able to get by with an average of about 6 hours and 15 minutes. But your chance of having that gene is equivalent to your chance of being struck by lightning. So, again, unless someone who's listening has had a bad experience in a golf course where they held up a club and then got zapped, I'd say you don't have the gene. What happens is that you just become accustomed to operating at a lower baseline, and you lose your reference point along the way. So you just don't even know what better feels or looks like. So what do we do in our evening routine? 2 things. One, we want to shut down our day. This is a static appointment that you put in your calendar a half hour before you'd like your day to end. It just says shut down. And during that appointment, you just do the same set of things every single time. So you do a final review of your email. You update your to-do list with any actions from the day. You look at your calendar for the next day, and then here's the 2 killer things. You choose the top 3 things you're going to do for the next day, and then you drop them into the white space of your day as appointments in your calendar, appointments with yourself. Now you're transitioning into the evening with your mind freed up. You know what you're going to be doing, when, tomorrow, that's all good. So you can be present and available. Next thing is a digital sunset. So 1 hour before you're going to go to bed, all lights, such that you get 8 hours of sleep, all electronic lights off. Because any electronic light in that hour before bed will lower your brain's melatonin production by 50%. And if we don't have enough melatonin flowing through the body, you will find it very difficult to sleep 8 hours. And even if you do sleep 8 hours, you won't get the deep, restful sleep. What does it have to do with productivity? Because if you don't sleep super well, restfully, deeply, you'll be easily distracted, be prone to procrastination and other things for the day that follows. So shut down, digital sunset, that gets you eight hours of sleep. I call that sedating yourself, not with a glass of wine, but like a pronunciation of shut down, Digital Sunset 8, SD8, sedate.
So when you
that's the
say
evening.
when you say the digital shutdown, are you saying I don't use the lights in my room, or
No,
just
sorry.
all the devices?
Yeah, so what I'm really going after is the TVs, the laptops, the
Yeah,
tablets, the phones,
yeah,
this high intensity light that's going into our eyes that tricks our brain into thinking it's still daylight. And then the brain stops producing melatonin, which is what induces sleep, because we've evolved to not sleep during the day. So if the brain is detecting what it feels to be daylight, it will say, okay, no, we're not going to sleep yet. Stop the melatonin production, right? Next, I would encourage people to have a morning routine. Two things here, once again. One, start your day off with some exercise. Exercise will make you much more productive throughout the day because it will boost your energy, actually increases your ability to focus. And it also creates a 12-hour mood boost. And you'll be a lot more productive when you're feeling a lot more positive. And that 12-hour mood boost is equivalent in strength to taking an antidepressant. So I always say to my clients, okay, when do you want to take your antidepressant? Right before bed? Or you want to take it at the start of the day? Kind of boost your mood throughout the day. And then when you start your day, don't start it in your inbox, social media, browsing the news. Start your day doing something creative before you react to other things. And that creative thing could just be simply starting to work for at least 1 hour on whatever one of your top 3 things were that you decided the night before. So evening routine, morning routine. The last one, this one I love. So this one is how you can add 13 weeks a year to your life every year by practicing this one. So the average person, this is in the book, The One Thing. The average person loses 28% of their workday from jumping around from one task to the other. And that's very, very inefficient. They start working on something, suddenly they check their inbox, now notification goes off on the phone, now they check their tea and coffee, the tea's cold, so they got to reheat that, they sit back down, they get a phone call, go back to the presentation they're working on, suddenly they have to leave for their next appointment, and they've only worked on, say, the presentation or whatever they had intended to work on for 13 minutes out of 60, right? So that 28% loss in a day, if we extrapolate that, so I took that piece of data and I said, okay, well, let's take 52 weeks and let's super generously strip out 6 for vacation and whatever else, sick time, whatever. So we got 46 weeks. 46 weeks times a 28% loss means that the average is 13 weeks. That means that the average person is losing a whole quarter each year. So of course people don't feel as productive as they could because they're only playing the game with 3 quarters. Like if this is a basketball game, you and I are playing against each other, my team against yours. And we get to the end of the 3rd quarter and it's like you tell me all of a sudden you say, okay, but you and your team, you have to sit the 4th quarter out now. And do I have any chance of winning? You're just going to be scoring left, right, and center, right? So,
yeah.
So we get these 13 weeks back by practicing the habit of single tasking, working on one thing at a time. Take your phone, turn it off, put it in the other room, throw it in a drawer, close down all your browser tabs. Don't have any notifications going on. Put your document, whatever you're working on, in full screen mode. And resist the temptation to jump and just stay there working on that one thing for at least 30 minutes, 60 minutes, whatever, and then move on to the next thing. And don't do kind of the rat in a maze, bouncing around from one wall to the next. Now, the ramification of doing this across a professional career, so it's 13 weeks a year, but done over a 40-year career, that's reclaiming an entire decade. So what could you do with an entire decade? That's like 2 new careers there.
Yeah, it's amazing. And what you're saying reinforces what I think Tony Schwartz, another guy, wrote a couple books now on they worked with athletes. And then they thought, well, can we repeat what we do with athletes in the corporate space where you work on a muscle and then you let it rest and then, it grows better.
Yeah.
And they went and worked with 600 corporations, I think, and proved it across the board in all 600 that the people who focused for an hour to an hour and a half, maximum 2 hours at a time, and then took a break, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, went out for a walk, got a healthy snack. It wasn't, down in McDonald's and Coca-Cola or something like that, or binging on some television show, but took a healthy break. They were more productive than people that were working straight through across the board. And what you're saying makes perfect sense. And I think it's a reminder for all. If I'm going to be candid, you're reminding me I'm allowing too many interruptions right now. So huge thing. So I think this is a great challenge to our audience to try these three things. Makes perfect sense. That'd be great. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So try implementing that evening routine. Sedate yourself in the evening. So you got a shutdown ritual, a digital sunset, 8 hours of sleep. Try the morning routine, exercise, then do something creative before you start reacting to stuff. And then for your work routine, single task. And then you added that second super important point, take breaks after those single tasking periods. Yeah. And then the last piece of the puzzle for me is anti-fragility. So the reason
I'm really curious about this one. That's not a phrase I hear maybe ever.
Yeah. Okay. So Nassim Taleb popularized this with his book Anti-Fragile. And if you ask the average person, well, what's the opposite of fragile? They'll say something like robust, maybe, or resilient. But whereas a fragile person, maybe can't take much of a beating, a robust person, they're stronger, they can take a few more hits, but eventually they break too. Resilience, per its definition, means that it's able to absorb shock and stay the same. Okay, but that's not really the opposite of fragile then. Anti-fragile is the true opposite, whereby the more the person gets hit, the stronger they become, right? So that's where we want to go. Now, again, people listening might think, oh, okay, there you go, right there. Okay, that doesn't apply to me then because that's just not realistic. Everyone who's listening, all of you, your bodies are the perfect temples of anti-fragility without you even knowing it. So you stress a muscle, it causes it to grow. You expose the body to germs and bacteria, it builds the immune system. Exposure to small doses of UV radiation generate vitamin D and actually repairs some tissues. So we just need to get what's going on in our bodies, which is anti-fragility at its best, up here in our heads. And we start by reframing stress into something that builds strength. So stress builds strength. It's what we go to the gym for. And if we take three groups of people, for example, one group experiences a stress-free life, second group experiences high amounts of stress but views it positively, third group experiences high amounts of stress but views it negatively. The group that lives the longest is actually the second group. They outlive the people who experience no stress in their life. It's the equivalent of the person who doesn't go to the gym and doesn't exercise. So they don't live as long as the people who go to the gym and exercise and stress their bodies, right? But we have to view it positively. So with this in mind, I encourage everyone to just reframe stress as not just something that happens when you exercise, but apply it to life. Life becomes one big mental gym. Every moment of adversity, challenge, all of these are just opportunities to step towards the weight rack, grab the dumbbell, grab the barbell, whatever it is, and complete the repetition. Rather than you're in the gym, somebody hands you the dumbbell, and then you look at it and you just run out of the gym, you walk away. That doesn't make you stronger, right? If you're there with the personal trainer and the personal trainer says, okay, I'd like you to do, 20 sit-ups, and you go, no. That's not gonna, you're not gonna be developing any abs with that, are you?
Yeah.
So anti-fragility starts with recognizing that anti-fragility as a concept exists. It's about turning stress into strength. And it's about taking what we already appreciate with physical exercise and applying it to daily life. And I'll give you, maybe just to wrap things up, I'll give people one simple practice that they can use to start doing this. And it's the art of the pause. So Rollo May, a great American psychologist, in the 60s, he wrote a piece which then inspired Stephen Covey. He wrote a piece where he talked about how if we just pause between the thing that's triggering us and don't respond right away, we can find and choose our best response. And then Stephen Covey gave it a bit more eloquence. And he said something along the lines of, between stimulus and response, there exists a space. And within that space lies both our growth and freedom. So what I mean is that when outside of the gym, when in daily life, when things stress us, when somebody presents to us a dumbbell and says, hey, here's a weight, complete the repetition, please. We often don't respond in an optimal way. So we respond often maybe in an emotional way. Somebody cuts us off or says something we don't like, or we don't hit our goals. And that suboptimal response is just not the response that would be congruent with the best version of us. It's not like how the 95-year-old version of you would respond, or your most courageous self, or you at your best would respond. It's something less than that. But if we just get into the habit of pausing, so trigger event, situation, episode, somebody says something that gets us going, pause. That's all you have to do. It's one common solution for all stressors. Just pause. That pause could be taking a deep breath. It could be walking out of the room. It could be counting to 3. It could be going for a long walk. Whatever it is, pause. Because when you disconnect the stimulus from your immediate reactionary response, then you can kind of go through your library files and pull out the optimal response. What is that optimal response? This is the beauty of it. You never have to worry about that. Because if you just get good at pausing, your inner wisdom, it will always reveal to you what the best version response is, right?
Yeah, I can validate what you're saying, because I teach my clients that when they're triggered, they don't go to your third one, the negative, but they do that. They do a pause. The best thing they can do is take a deep breath, be quiet, and pause, and then decide, is this something I just need to ask some questions, listen some more? Do I need to take a break? I could go into stories. I think you're totally on it, which is really great. I also want to know, am I following you correctly? Because one of the habits I'm trying to develop, which quite frankly I'm struggling with, but I'm really dedicated, I want to get this done, is that when there's a stress issue that comes or I get triggered, I want to teach myself to ask myself, okay, what am I supposed to learn here? Or ask, I wonder what's going on in that person's life that they said it in that tone, that they were that mean, or they were that disrespectful, or because something's triggered me. It's not, I don't mind if they come up and they say, something's terrible happened. That doesn't trigger you, get you angry, necessarily go to the negative, though you can think bad things. But am I following you correctly that what you're recommending is kind of take a pause, and you may have to also train yourself, how to have a new thought pattern, because particularly today, under the pressure of this, pandemic, et cetera, a lot of people go into victim mode and into the blame game. And that's the instinctive response. Even if they take a pause, Eric, they're going to start telling themselves, I'm right, that person's terrible, blah, blah, blah. It actually could, if they do it and they do your third route, the negative one, they could come out angrier than they were initially.
Yeah. Well, and they might be right, but there's still a best way of delivering that, right? So they could be in a situation where they are being taken advantage of, where something has been said to them that is disrespectful. But rather than add fuel to the fire or respond in a way that really doesn't reveal, an upper hand or a higher level of existence, and is just, if anything, taking it into a downward spiral. Rather than doing that, they may say something like, I really don't appreciate what you just said, and I'm not going to be sticking around to hear any more of this.
Yeah.
And walk out, perhaps, or or they say, sorry, but you're being disrespectful, and I don't appreciate that, so I'm out. There's I don't. I don't want people to feel like they still can't express themselves, but there's a difference between expressing yourself neutrally, strongly, and confidently in congruence with the best in you versus, getting sucked into the game, that goes nowhere.
Yeah. Totally agree. Hey, Eric, this has been fantastic. So I assume people, I know because we've talked about it, looked at it. So I know people can get your book, 3 Alarms, on Amazon. And is it also on Audible?
It will be on Audible. But I also have a special offer too for everyone listening. So definitely would love if you head over to Amazon and check that out. But if you like digital books as well, if you head to my website at ericpartaker.com, ERIC, Partaker, like it sounds, PARTAKER.com. For the next couple of weeks after this airs, you can pick up a free digital copy of the book. And there's also a free video training, with worksheet sequence that I'm offering to help embed some of the principles that we discussed today and some of the other ones that I discussed in the book as well. So there's some goodies waiting for the listeners over at the site.
Fabulous. Thank you so much for your generosity. I will take you up on that, and I'll encourage our audience to do the same. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you so much. And thanks again for everyone listening. And remember IPA to take you further.